Welcome to CBTS Tech Talk. I'm your host, Lance Hart, and today we're going to be talking about Beyond the Hype, exploring the real benefits of SASE. And today, as always, I am joined by my esteemed colleagues. I've got Justin Rice and John Lloyd. Welcome, guys. Let's jump right in.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Yeah. John, good to see you again. I love your outfit today.
Honestly, great lines, think alike, and today's no different. Good wardrobe choice.
Good wardrobe, even down to the shoes. I like it.
Yeah, you can't see that off camera, but we have the same shoes on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So today, thanks, Lance. We're going to be talking about SASE and really exploring the real benefits of SASE. Obviously, that's been a hype in the marketplace. A lot of the clients that you and I interface with are really interested in learning more about SASE from folks like us, and they're doing a lot of their own exploration too, and coming oftentimes with their own preconceived notion of what SASE is. So for the audience today, why don't you, in your words, tell us what SASE is?
So the textbook, secure access, security edge, right? Secure service edge. To me, SASE is the convergence of network and security into a reduced amount of vendors. I think we'll talk about some of that today when we talk about the hype. They don't all have to have the same logo on it, despite what the OEM sales pitches may tell you. But it is the convergence of the network of how we reach applications, doing so securely and from wherever. So what does that mean? It means it's SD-WAN, it's zero-touch network access to hopefully replace our VPN strategy. It is a secure web gateway. It is cloud access security brokerage. It is putting an umbrella around networking and security into a unified platform. Now, that unified doesn't need to be the same logo, and we'll talk today about best of breed versus single vendor approach.
Yep. Okay, good. I like that. It feels almost that SASE, the convergence of network and security, was almost inevitable as especially SD-WAN continued to mature. I felt like that was going to be an inevitable thing. It almost felt like it got accelerated through the pandemic where security was no longer governed by just the place you went to work. It was where you existed everywhere. And it forced organizations, I think, to rethink how they secure all of their users' endpoints, regardless of where they are. Tell me about SASE's role in that.
So we saw this huge influx right at March of 2020. Everybody went home, and we saw SASE pipelines grow through the roof. But we saw adoption of SASE. And then we kind of got this hybrid return to work, and we really have seen that pipeline stay, but not necessarily turn into adoption or sale. And my belief in that is when we went home, we were physically constrained by certain things. I need to connect you, right? We had a customer, that was the first phone call I got after everybody went to work from home. They have 54,000 employees and zero VPN capability. So what do we do? Well, do you have virtualized resources that I can put something on? Is it big enough? Even companies that had a good VPN posture, it maybe was licensed for 20% of your organization or 40%, or your internet bandwidth wasn't ready for it. And so it wasn't as simple as saying, we have VPN, everybody go home. It was 100% of your people going home, and it was bringing all of that bandwidth into the network. And so you started to see like the Zscalers of the world in 2020, people quickly adopt that kind of secure access, with the concept being a lot of my applications are web apps or they're SaaS apps. I don't have the infrastructure in place to bring all of these work from home employees into my data center. And so it became a necessity. We made a choice. We made an adoption. Then over the next 2.5 years, what happened was all of the SASE providers or security providers, the OEM, started to say, well, let me define SASE. It's whatever else I do also. I bought this company and now I do EDR. Isn't that part of your SASE? Or you're in Azure. Well, shouldn't that be my same, right? And so that's where we talk about some of the hype. Is it doesn't mean it's one size fits all. You don't have to buy every SKU from the same OEM. But I think that's what's created this paralysis coming back out of it. I didn't have a choice in 2020. I had to securely connect my work from home users. Now in 2023, going into 2024, I can actually create a real roadmap and make more educated decisions.
So it's an interesting perspective. So in your mind, let's talk through this. So the key tenets of SASE. So it sounds like our customers and us alike have kind of, and OEMs have come up over the years with their own definition of SASE, but it almost feels like we are honing into an agreeable state that we know SASE does. It's SD-WAN, like you said. It is Cloud Access Security Broker, Secure Web Gateway. VPN client or some replacement
ZTNA, hopefully, instead of VPN. Yeah.
So are those the key tenets? Or are there anything else? Like what are you seeing folks add in to a SASE strategy?
Yeah. So it depends on the organization, depends on their size, depends on their footprint, depends on their use case. The network is still important, but it's not always as important as it was in the past, depending on your organization. If everybody's working from home or working remotely, or all of your apps are out of the data center and they're all built into, SaaS applications or, hosted web applications, I don't have the same level of concern. Some organizations I may. So the network is still important, but it's not as important as it used to be, especially down market, mid-size and down customers. The enterprise a little bit more, those that have kind of forced some back to office, working. Obviously, I need to connect, in ZTNA, this idea. So one of the analyst houses says, get rid of VPN within 6 months. That's the number one priority. Move to a zero trust network access. So how do we build a model around you, the employee, plus your devices, plus the applications, right? That to me is the most important tenet. Once I start and I have that ZTNA in place, now it's secure web gateway, firewall as a service, right?
Yep.
Kind of a big difference there. In the past, we used to use proxies all the time for security outbound enforcement, but now there's real services that we might need to bring in from the cloud. Maybe it is, legacy VPN if we haven't switched yet. Maybe it's inbound routing. So to me, the core tenets of it are a firewall in the cloud, ZTNA for my end users, cloud access security brokerage, meaning, some email security or detonation for hosted SaaS apps, all while not losing sight of what is my network. Is my network everybody working from home? Then the SD-WAN piece isn't as big. Is it coming back into my office? Then SD-WAN is still a very real play.
Yeah. So interesting. So let's shift then to, I was reading an article a couple weeks ago where it said, hey, listen, in 2021, only as organizations started to adopt SASE, only 20% of organizations adopted SASE in a single vendor solution.
Yep.
Where I think some of the analyst firms are saying now in 2025, so 2 years from now, 80% are going to adopt a single vendor SASE solution. I think as we sit here today in 2023, while that sounds well and good, I haven't seen a single vendor. I've seen single vendor SASE just now starting to be a talking point. I don't know how we get to the 80% in 2025. What do you think?
So the first thing is lifecycle management. So when you look at, and this is where I talk about this paralysis and people now going, how do we do this the right way? And so that's looking out at your security posture. Are you using a physical appliance still for email security on-prem, right? Like the legacy Iron Port stuff. Are you using a Blue Coat proxy for outbound? Are you using and hosting, whether it's AnyConnect or Global Protect? Do you have hardware in your data center? What are the things that you talked about? Firewall as a service, secure web gateway, email security, all of those. What are the vendors in place today? And when does hardware need to be refreshed, or when does licensing come up? So that's the first reason you're going to see more of a single vendor approach take off, is just time. We now are going to depreciate that asset, or the license is going to expire, and we're going to look to expand the investment and the collaboration between that same vendor. The second piece of it is standardization across the industry. So this year, there was one OEM in the Magic Quadrant for single vendor SSE. That's going to continue to change over time, just as in the original SD-WAN quadrants, there was one or two, and now there's 4 or 5. Investments are going to continue to be made. SD-WAN vendors are going to get better at SASE, and SASE vendors are going to get better at SD-WAN. So I think that's going to help. The other piece is up market. I don't think it's going to. That's where the 20% is the enterprise, where it's going to remain best of breed. Meaning, I mentioned this earlier. The network isn't as important if I'm mid-market, all SaaS apps, everyone's working from home. Well, in the enterprise, they still have legacy apps. They still have technical debt. They still have data center, right? Like that stuff, you don't modernize 1,000 apps from x86 to serverless compute overnight. And so that's where you really are going to see that best of breed approach of what is the right security vendor, what the right SSE, and what's the right SD-WAN.
So it sounds like if you're an organization, put words in your mouth here, John, but if you're an organization that exists in maybe that mid-market, low enterprise space, as you evaluate a SASE strategy from now to the next 3 years, single vendor is a thing to consider.
I mean, and how are you doing it? Are you doing it yourself? Or are you working with a managed service partner? Like, does best of breed create headache for you?
Yep.
Right. And one of the things we try to do with our customers is at any stage, whether that's mid-market, enterprise, doesn't matter. We want to always bring best of breed and put that simplified wrapper around it. We're managing it. You shouldn't care what the logo is.
Yep.
You should care what those outcomes are and how easy it is to do business with CBTS in our case. If you're somebody that's doing it in-house and having to staff expertise and having to have skill sets and certifications and training and go to the conference every year to learn, that's a lot easier with a smaller amount of vendors in the network.
Okay.
Guys, I have a question I could jump in. And it's kind of in topic with what you're talking about. So this person was asking about what are the challenges currently experienced with SASE, and I think you started to address some of those. If you want to kind of dive back into that,
So one challenge is simply lifecycle management. Understanding what you have in place today, what maybe hasn't been depreciated. Another is exactly what I said, where there's one vendor. Is that in the single vendor magic quadrant top right? Does that price point align with a mid-market customer or down? Does it fit the budget? There's certainly financial constraints to making any sort of decision there. And so that is one of the drawbacks is, to me, OEMs are so focused on getting 100% wallet share as opposed to focusing on executing as well as possible. And so I think the good ones are SD-WAN providers that out of the box integrate very well with other SSE providers, automated, optimized, easy to configure and monitor and those sorts of things. So to me, that's always been the drawback of it's what I call the me too. Like, oh, we do that too. We do that too. And it's not necessarily focused. When you're an OEM, you sell one widget, right? So guess what? The right answer, the right widget is. And so that to me is the drawback. I just think it's too much vendor consolidation and not looking at business outcomes.
Yeah, I do think one challenge that I've seen is SASE is new to a lot of people, or at least how it's engineered together for a deployment to a customer is new. I know we've put a lot of energy and effort into training up engineers and investing a lot of time and money into making sure they're well versed on SASE deployments. I don't see that across the market yet, where we have a lot of operational excellence in deploying SASE solutions.
Yeah, we always tell customers, do you want a good, fast, or cheap? Choose two. Yeah. You can't have all of that.
Yep.
And that to me is OEMs are so focused on single vendor approach. And so you've got to decide, is good enough,
yep.
right? That's my big issue. The other drawback is, especially depending on who the SASE vendor is, some came from a hardware world, some did not. You still have an attack surface at your branch, right? And I think for born in the cloud, raised in the cloud, there's this like misconception of, well, you built a tunnel, whether that tunnel's from your PC with a ZTNA approach, or if it's from a branch with an SD-WAN approach. Okay, well, what's hanging there? It's still an internet connection coming into the branch, or maybe multiple. And so I think people lose sight that I still have a physical world, whether it's east-west firewalling, because you're not going to haul that to a cloud base, right? I still want to do east-west inspection at my branch. I still have an attack surface at my branch. I still have attack surfaces in my data center. So it's not a drawback of SASE, but I do think it's often overlooked that, like, oh, I moved to SASE, I don't need to worry about security posture at my branches anymore. And that's certainly a fallacy.
It is, yeah.
Another one that came in was what are the key considerations when addressing the complexity of implementing and integrating SASE solution with an existing infrastructure?
Yeah. No, great question. I think what we're seeing a lot of times is even in our own organization where you kind of want to, it's new and exciting, it's shiny, you want to rush to implement it because it's this thing that's going to take me to the next level as an organization. When in reality, what we see is take a breath. Let's sit down and let's investigate what you have today, how we may migrate thoughtfully to make sure you get the most out of your investment in SASE, but also to reduce that complexity. It does require a little bit more legwork up front than maybe you've employed in the past. And that's a good thing because it is next generation. If you want to take advantage of, listen, it's not easy. It is complex. If you want to take advantage of everything that SASE offers you, you got to be a little bit more thoughtful up front about assessing what you have, designing for the future, taking that current state, mapping to a future state is a really big deal.
There's also management planes. We take a lot into account. where do your people live? Where do your applications live? Some vendors are automatically global distributed points of presence. Others you pay by region, like a cloud approach. So that's certainly part of the conversation that we need to take into account. Everything that we talk about and analysts talk about are this 3 to 5 year roadmap. Well, what does that mean? I mean, you need a project team. You need a project manager for 3 to 5 years, understanding, again, I talked about lifecycle management, what makes sense. And when you look at most OEMs in the SASE space, you buy a certain license, and that license might entitle you to throughput, and then it might entitle you to data loss prevention, and then another one might entitle you to sandboxing, right? Like, or SSL decryption. And so it's looking at what are the other things that you have in your network, and not just from a tech standpoint of migrating, but a financial standpoint. When does it make sense to go live? What happens? The good news is you can kind of, like, the path of least resistance, like start with your mobile workforce. Pretty easy to replace VPN. And that's what analysts are saying. Like, all the analyst firm are get VPN out. And obviously, if you watch the news, the last 6 months have been really rough on VPN for CVEs, for outages, for that sort of stuff. But it's also an inelastic, non-scalable platform with its own security vulnerabilities. If somebody gets your password, they have your VPN. That's not the same case in ZTNA. So build a plan financially, business-wise, build it into the budget, have a project management team, look for first downs, small wins to start biting the elephant rather than trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, I do have one more. We got a lot of questions today. Keep it coming, guys. How does the concept of zero trust fit in with SASE?
So the first thing is, like in the past, I had a password, right? And pick I don't care if it's FortiVPN, Cisco AnyConnect, Palo Alto, Global Protect. I had a password and I could authenticate and get onto the network. Well, the first thing is I'm connecting from multiple devices. The end user experience is critical. And when you start thinking about SASE, like at the end of the day, security, it's the most important thing in the world until the VP of sales is having a bad day and a bad experience because of how you architected it, right? Like somebody's going to the squeaky wheel, or it gets the grease. So when we look at ZTNA, it's the first tool that allows us to deliver a great employee experience from wherever they're at. We're distributing that architecture globally. So rather than having to come back to a data center to a server that's running an application, we can go to the closest geo cloud to authenticate. The second is it makes how we look at ZTNA, and there are some slight different definitions on who you talk to in the space. I, John Lloyd, am a resource that gets an identity, right? The application gets security built into it. What can I access? What should I access? What can I access it from? And so, we use this example of if I have connected from my laptop and 20 minutes later, another device connects saying it's me, but from 3 states away, hold on, there's an abnormality there. That's not real. Whereas with VPN, it's like, well, no, you put the password in. So to me, ZTNA is about securing the end user to keep, obviously keep security happy. It's building that validation between the app, between the device, and between the employee, but also creating a great end user experience because it's quickly getting me to the closest POP.
Well, yeah, I agree with you, John. I also think, zero trust as a framework holistically, as you are an organization, you look at all of your architectural elements and say, all right, am I prepared to adopt zero trust? Zero trust network access, SASE fits into that zero trust framework holistically as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's other, SASE is just like I talked about, like the network and the branch and the attack surface. SASE doesn't cure all of that. There's still other pieces where SASE is not solving for yet anyway. Identity access management, identity access governance. ZTNA starts to bleed into that with some identity-based services, least privilege access. But that's the key is, what do you need access to? When do you need access to it? And what are you accessing it from? VPN is like, oh, okay, you've plugged into the network. You're good to go. Anybody who's got your password can plug in. The other thing too,
always assume breach.
Well, when you travel, right? Like, how often do you connect on airport Wi-Fi or your hotel Wi-Fi? Do you go and VPN in? No, you and I, yeah. How many employees, right? We always talk about your biggest vulnerability being your employees. So you're trusting that they're going to VPN in over these public shared networks, which a lot of times can be poor performance when they do it, or it's laborsome that they have to like log out and re-authenticate. Or how many people, are at Panera or Starbucks or whatever working and they are VPN'd in and they get up to go get another, coffee or use the restroom and that sort of thing. So I think the idea of ZTNA, it's critical. I mean, that's the one analysis out right now says within 6 months, get VPN out of your network.
Yeah.
Build a 3 to 5 month roadmap for SASE, get VPN out now.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's see, about 10 minutes left. I do want to talk through, if you're a C-level executive in any organization and you're getting bombarded with folks saying you need to adopt SASE.
Yep.
The 3 questions I ask or would ask would be, okay, is this going to help me make money, save money, or mitigate my risk?
Yep.
We've talked through mitigating risk, I think. Let's talk through the financial elements of SASE. And is this an opportunity to provide cost savings for an organization?
So there's a lot of people that don't like that OEMs have moved to like subscription models. But when I look at like this space specifically, maybe I can get that in access points or switching. Like with security, they're evolving literally every day. There's 0-day attacks. You're never truly safe. They're continuing to look at code bases and threat signatures and known bad actors and all of these things for you. So to me, going and buying firewalls everywhere, sizing it for the right thing, to then just have to continually patch it or hotfix it or increase it because you have more traffic and you have more throughput. Like nobody's calling us and going, hey, I really need to have less bandwidth in my network, right? And so with the idea of SASE to me is cost savings because of the fact that it is elastic. You can grow with it. You don't have to worry about downtime. You don't have to worry about maintenance windows. You don't have to worry.
Sorry to interrupt, but it sounds like managing technical debt starts to go away.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like it just becomes a pay by the drink like you would anything else. And it's like across the IT landscape, like security is it really makes sense to be paying a subscription model because you want that technology to continue to evolve with you. It is not a set it and forget it, where I understand like some other technology people get annoyed with, like, I just didn't want to have to pay a subscription. I didn't carry support after the first whatever anyway. Like security is not one of those. So I think for me as a IT leader, really SASE is about mitigating risk because I always stay up to date. But it's also from a cost standpoint, not just that, but it's what's the impact of slow network or poor performance or frustrated employees. I mean, there's a lot of soft cost to it as well. But anything elastic and being able to pay as you need it.
Yeah. And then employee experience, I think, and you touched on this with ZTNA, is finally having a security platform or architecture that supports you having a positive employee experience wherever you are.
And also as an employee too, like that is your biggest weakness. And that's why we do stuff like phishing, and campaigns and trainings and all of that stuff. But like me as an employee, if you accidentally do click a link, right? Like I've seen some really, really good ones. And sometimes your brain, your emotions react to your ethos before you're live.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so you go, whoa, and you click the link and then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Right. Like I love the fact that it's going to go through, data loss prevention is going to get sandblasted, in sandboxed and detonated. And like all of those are tools that help keep me safe as an employee. The more you can make it easy for me, the employee, the better.
Yeah. I mean, especially you traveling as you do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Hey guys, I had a question what are your thoughts on combining SASE and zero trust model with data management and administration such as data lakes or databases?
So I kind of look at security and data laking and database management more into like the DevSecOps side of things. So there is a tie into both, right? Because there is data loss prevention, or you do want, so there's like some platforms like we call like honeycombing of like being able to anonymize and share data, which becomes really important for like adjacent industries. Think of like healthcare with pharmaceutical, right? Like hospital, pharmaceutical, being able to share data and do analysis of it in data laking with anonymity to it. I would say for me anyway, like security is obviously wildly important. That is, I think, more adjacent to a DevSecOps approach of security as code and making sure you have security into your pipelines. You have PHI stripping, you have east-west firewalling and things like that in the data lake and the database management more so than SASE, but certainly wildly important.
What about I don't want to forget about this. The future of SD-WAN is what? I mean, you and I have been around SD-WAN kind of since the inception. We've been talking with our clients about it for the last 8 or 9 years. Where does SD-WAN go from here?
So it depends on the organization and what you're, hiring it to do. I think there will absolutely be organizations that ZTNA is the network, right? You got an internet pipe and you got a laptop running a ZTNA client. And do I need a firewall if every laptop is a firewall, right? And so maybe I just protect the data center. There are still certainly organizations, think retail. Retail, while obviously should adopt the SASE strategy, SD-WAN is wildly important there, right? Think about seasonal employees or part-time employees. Like ZTNA can get really, kind of identity access management can get wildly expensive to try to build out. If I'm critical with voice, those are still going to be wildly important over a network. So I don't think the importance of SD-WAN goes away. I think as you look at deployment of SD-WAN, to me, it finally is going to focus more on the software side of it.
Yeah.
Meaning, hey, do you want a ZTNA client or do you want an SD-WAN client that also can provide some of that security, but also do some of the magic of SD-WAN with quality of assurance?
Yeah, that makes sense.
How do we see the integration of quantum safe PQC solutions and SASE? How will this roadmap look?
I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Quantum
safe PQC.
PQC. Okay, well, we'll get back
parking
to you
lot
on
that one.
Yeah, we'll respond to you on that one. Another question we have is the cost model for most SASE vendors is user-based, which can grow fast, right?
Yeah.
And not be economical for large organizations. Do you see a shift in that pricing model anytime soon?
So there are several that you can choose throughput as opposed to employee or device count. It depends on your business, and if you're kind of a follow the sun model, like think retail, where you have stores open 4 hours earlier here than you do in California, and then that kind of flips on the other side, and you can kind of do a shared bandwidth model. There are some that also kind of do a combination where you can kind of do it by concurrency of what's signed in or bandwidth. So I can say, I want 500 meg. Well, or I want 500. Well, it could be 500 employees mobily, or it could be 500 meg or something blended between, 250 and 250. So I think you're going to start to see the real cost savings as you look at it's 6-7 SKUs to get to all the things SASE can do. And it's what those SKUs replace in your network over the next 3 to 5 years that create that. Well, there are several that do bandwidth.
Yeah. I mean, the throughput versus user. I mean, I think that's something we've even learned along the way is sometimes it takes us sitting down and doing a math problem with the customers of what makes the most sense for you as a bandwidth as a user.
And that's so. Let's talk about that quickly in the last 2 minutes. Not everything needs to go through the SASE, and I think that's where the important part of best of breed. When you look at an SD-WAN that can help you route at layer 7 from a branch and say, does this need protected at all? Or is it just bulk traffic? Is it Netflix? Is it Facebook? Is it guest Wi-Fi, right? Which obviously be layer 3. But my point being, if I pay by bandwidth, do I really want to pay for guests in my network watching Netflix in the waiting room of a doctor's office? No, right?
Right.
So send that locally. And then how much of my traffic, maybe I want protected, meaning by protected, think forward error correction, right? That sort of stuff. Choosing best path optimization, but doesn't need to go through a firewall. Think voice, Microsoft Teams voice, Cisco WebEx calling, right? I don't want to send that through a SASE. So if I have an SD-WAN that I can choose to send something locally, or I can choose to bookend it to a cloud gateway SD-WAN POP, then what do I need to send through back to that SASE platform? And then you talk about sitting down with a customer. Also, what things are out on the internet? I don't want to use SASE for routing, meaning if I want to go reach something in the data center and I want to do east-west firewall, just put a firewall in the data center and route back to that. And, so for me, it's kind of like a cloud strategy. What needs to be elastic, knowing that cost can grow with it? What makes sense to be in the cloud? What makes sense to route through your SASE?
And that layer 7 policy creation is still wildly important.
Wildly important. Yep.
All right. Well, Lance, it looks like that is our last question. We hit 30 minutes on the head. Good use of time today. Lance, as always, thank you for your production skills. You always bring it to the table. And John, thank you for being here again today. And until next time.
Yeah, appreciate the feedback today, the questions.
Yeah, great question.
Well, thanks everybody for joining today. And until next time, take care.